time now for some closing thoughts from our contributors. We thought today we'd talk about green initiatives and maybe some unintended consequences of some of them. Afsaneh, you mentioned one about biomass particularly.
Yes, because we've been hearing about trillion trees getting planted, and I think everyone is very excited about that. The other side of the equation that we haven't been thinking about is the number of trees that get taken out to feed biomass power. And what is interesting about biomass is that it gets bundled together with all other renewables, what we talked about in terms of solar, wind, and others that are truly renewable. But it involves taking down trees, large trees. Of course, it does take advantage of some other parts of trees, but you're taking out trees that you would have to replant, and it will take 30 years. And worse than that, you are putting in a lot of CO2 into the air. In fact, it can be, from a combustion point of view, worse than natural gas.
So, Steve, as we know, some of the best-intentioned efforts sometimes have unintended consequences. And even the trillion trees, which sounds like a good idea, President Trump talked about it at Davos. I talked to somebody today who said, well, it depends on where you plant them. Because if you plant them somewhere that otherwise would have been white, like with snow and ice, it actually increases the temperature of the planet. It doesn't reduce it. But as an investor, how do you sort out, if you can, what are things that sound good on paper that actually don't do anything good for the environment, as opposed to those that actually may make a difference?
Well, first, we're an investor, so we don't try to sort that out. We try to figure out how we can earn a high rate of return. We have colleagues at Bloomberg Philanthropies whose job it is to give away all the money we hopefully make, and they have a hard job of sorting out what can actually make a difference. Look, they're complicated calculations because you have primary, secondary, tertiary, whatever comes after that, effects of all these policies that you have to work all the way back and figure out which ones are actually net reducing the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere and which ones aren't.
But Afsaneh, are you seeing out there in the investment community an increased desire to really invest in green companies or greener companies, not because it's the right thing to do, because they think in the longer term the returns will be better?
I think absolutely. People are looking at it as long-term value creation and risk mitigation, both. So you've seen particularly insurance companies that are implicitly looking at the cost of CO2, not because they believe or don't believe, but they're seeing that it's going to impact their business. You're seeing a lot of, what we just talked about, BP, looking at it in terms of future business may not be just oil and gas. They do have to diversify to be around. And investors are looking at companies much more carefully in terms of their value chain and how they are looking at the use of energy.
So, Steve, are you seeing in the investment community, because we have the Larry Finks of this world really being very bold and saying they're really going to curtail their investments, direct their investments, remonstrate with companies that don't comply with what they want. Is that real, or is it something we in the media like to talk about a lot? Let's be frank.
I think we have to wait and see. Larry has been even more outspoken this year than he was in previous years, and we'll see what they end up doing. I think you do have to be careful. We do need other kinds of energy as bridge fuels. We do need companies to achieve high rates of profitability, not just comply with all kinds of ESG sorts of things. I am closer to Milton Friedman than further away from him on the issue of what companies' roles and responsibilities are in society. We have the best companies in the world, I believe, in terms of their efficiency, their management quality, their focus, their allocation of capital. And quite frankly, I would not want to see us become like companies in some other parts of the world, in Europe, for example, where they get into all these different agendas and they end up not producing as much value as we want them to.
So what's your agenda at RockCreek?
Our agenda is to create value, and I think we are now at the point in time where investment in things related to climate actually will be very high return.
I hope you're right, but I haven't been convinced just yet.